I'm going to let you guys all log on in. We're looking forward to tonight. My name is BJ Dramby. I'm a high school social studies teacher. I teach outside Philadelphia, PA, and I'll be with you for the next 5 nights. I am one of a very strong team. The cram sessions that you're going to be seeing over the next 5 nights are going to have a lot of opportunities for you to engage in the chat, engage with us, and engage with each individual as we all work to help you in the chat get through this. So I want to introduce my partner in crime, Dr. Posa.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Posa, and sometimes some of my students call me Dr. AP because my initials are AP for Amy Posa, and I teach AP World History in San Antonio, Texas. I'm really excited for the next 5 nights to take you guys through the full curriculum and do some practice prompts and get you where you need to be so that you can get a 5 on the AP exam.
Awesome. I want to introduce Deborah.
Hey guys, I'm Deb. I'm a former AP World student and high school senior. I am so excited to be here and part of this amazing team running these crams. I hope to run some quizzes and interact with y'all in the chat. We're so excited to get started.
Thank you, Deborah. And you're going to be seeing Deborah for the next 5 nights. She'll be leading quizzes, videos, and such. I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody to Adeline. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear Adeline, but she can give us a big wave. Adeline's got a little bit of glitchiness going on. Adeline actually is yeah, we hear you. Go ahead, introduce yourself, Adeline.
I'm Adeline. Okay, I'm Adeline, and I'm a sophomore, so I'm also taking the world exam with everyone. And yeah, I'm really excited to be working with everyone over the next couple nights.
You're going to be seeing a lot of videos over the next few nights. Adeline made a bunch of videos to help you through all the different rubric points of the DBQ. And finally tonight, though, we have other partners in crime. Our last partner I want to introduce is Promise. Promise, can you give a little introduction?
Hi, I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Promise. I'm a junior in high school, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. And I hope you guys are all going to stick around for the next few nights. There's going to be actually 2 videos that Promise put together that are exceptional. I've learned a lot from working with her. All right. So we're going to do real fast introductions with you. If you all could, in the chat, write your city, comma, and state. Ready, set, go. Where are you coming from? Maybe I shouldn't have asked that. It's going so fast, it's hard to read. Texas, Florida, New York, Vermont. A lot of New York, Georgia. Saw somebody from PA represent.
I'm pretty sure we have every state represented. Well, we can go back and
did
check
anybody
later,
see Alaska? New York, New York. That's what this shirt is from, actually. New York City Department of Ed.
Oh, we have someone from Taiwan.
We have somebody from Reading, PA, by the way. That's where right near where I teach. Excellent. So you can see this is a full continental thing that you're going to be doing. We are all going to be here for the same reason. AP World Exam is in less than a week, and we want to work together to succeed at it. So at the bottom, you're going to see a green box that says AP World Cram Hub Slides, Replays, Review Packet. That is the type of stuff you're going to want to access. So if you want to go ahead and hit that at any time, it'll benefit you. The one review packet we created allows you to Haiti, nice. North Korea, okay. North Carolina, all right. I'm just seeing a lot of neat things. With the review packet, you can actually type along as you hear things. So you're actually engaged and you're actually active, all right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll be walking through a pretty long, lengthy slideshow for tonight.
I just want to point out there was a question in the chat. The slides and the review packet coincide. So if you're following along in the review packet, then you will be able to get the information from the slides and we'll walk you through them.
Excellent. Thank you. So, oh, I want to make that bigger. There we go. So let's go ahead and get started. First of all, there's going to be times that in the chat, you're going to ask a question. One of the team will try to address it, and everybody else is welcome to try to address other comments in the chat. However, this is what I'm learning. Don't be distracted by just the chat. You're also here for the lesson, the 3 hours of work that we're putting forth in front. So tonight, our goal is to go through AP World History Units 1 through 4, which means we're going to study 1200 all the way to 1750. By the way, in my classroom, that takes from August to December. We're going to do this by 10 p.m. Eastern. It's kind of laughable. So please go ahead and follow at Think5able on social media. A bigger following only makes a stronger organization. This is the team, so you're welcome to reference us, especially in the chat. You're also welcome to give us shout outs if we're doing something that you like. To make the most of a cram finale this night and the next 4, keep active. Don't try to write everything down. You're going to want to maybe jot down a few words here and there, the basis of the mnemonics that you're going to have. Write down some questions that you want to answer later on. Now, don't forget that the Cram Hub will have replays. So if you log out tonight because you got things to do, it's Saturday, you can watch a replay. Feel free to use the group chat, but don't overwhelm yourself. You're not here to monitor the chat. That's our job. Finally, there is a Q&A tab where if you want to ask a distinct question, you can use that tab. However, please know that throwing it in the chat, it might get answered faster and by more people. Please also, if you're thinking that you're getting tired or overwhelmed, go get a drink. Go take a nap. Go check your phone and see what's up in the world. Then you can come back later. I don't want you saying, I'm tired, I'm going to log off for the rest of the night. So please don't forget about this community. We need to be supportive. We need to be patient, especially when we're having tech issues, and we need to be kind. Everybody here has the same goal, but we all come from different parts of the world. So with that in mind, my last introductory slide is we are offering a $100 if you are selected in sharing your cram experience. So post a thought about your cram finale on TikTok or Instagram. Use the @5ablecrams and tag @5able in the post or the caption. We want to see how we can spread the word, all right? So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to, I think, Amy. Oh, this was still my slide. Sorry. So you're going to notice I actually laugh when we made this agenda. It's actually really funny. We're going to go Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4. And it's like, oh my gosh. Now, along those units, we're going to have breaks. There are going to be quizzes and Q&As. There's also going to be some skill development. So don't worry. There's always going to be an opportunity for you to have like a brain break. So we're about to enter period 1, 1200 to 1450. Amy, I just want to let you know, I don't know what slide number we're on. So as we're progressing, I'm going to try to stick to the numbers that we talked about, but in the format, I can't see it. So I'm going to pass it over to you to dive into Unit 1.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it should be pretty clear. We're moving through the packet. The questions on the packet are designed to go along with the slides. There was a question in the chat about, can we just take notes on paper? That's fine as well. And then know that you will have access to this recording and you can always go back. One thing I tell my students is that you don't necessarily, there are gaps in your knowledge. So there are some things that seem very familiar and you're like, I know this, I know in this entire unit. And then other times there will be things that like, okay, this is maybe something I learned before, but it sounds like the first time I'm hearing it. So that's totally normal. That's totally fine. Part of the purpose of review is to really target what are the things that you need to focus on at this point. So, all right, well, let's start. We'll go ahead and talk about Unit 1.1, which is East Asia. These are your 6 topics in the Global Tapestry: East Asia, Dar al-Islam, which means the Islamic world, South and Southeast Asia, the Americas, Africa, and Europe. Everything going on in the world from 1200 to 1450. So let's first talk about East Asia from 1200 to 1450. One thing I do want to point out is that you don't need to memorize dates, you need to memorize time periods. You really only need to know 4 main groupings: 1200 to 1450, which is what we're doing. That's units 1 and 2. And then the second half of this, you'll do 1450 to 1750, which is units 3 and 4. The way that the College Board asks questions always uses those dates, those markers. So when you are thinking about key terms, always think, what is the time period that this particular key term goes into? I think about it like you have 4 buckets or 4 silos. So everything we're talking about until the quiz is in the bucket of 1200 to 1450. So the first part of it in East Asia, there's only 3 dynasties to know. So that's good. You know, back in the day before they redesigned the exam, you had to know more than 3 dynasties. You had to know all of them dating back to the unification of China under Qing Shi Huangdi in 221 BCE. But now you guys are so lucky. You get to start with the Song. So the first dynasty is the Song. Then you have the Yuan, and you guys probably know the difference between the Song, the Yuan, and the Ming, because the Yuan are special because of what? Put it in the chat. It is that they are the Mongols. So the Song, Yuan, and then the Ming are a restoration to traditional Chinese rule. Those are the 3 dynasties to know: Song, Yuan, and Ming. All right, so now what do you need to know about the Song? That's the next topic. One thing that's really important to note, characteristics that continue throughout the different dynasties, but particularly from the Song to the Ming, are that all of these dynasties have an emperor who claim the mandate of heaven. So that is an important continuity, whatever dynasty it is, unless it's the Mongols, the emperor claims the mandate of heaven. Except what's really interesting about the Mongols is that Kublai Khan, which is something we'll talk about, Kublai Khan, the founder of the Yuan dynasty, also decides to claim the mandate of heaven and have an identity that is both Mongol and Chinese. So also there's a centralized bureaucracy. What that essentially means is that the government divides the business of government into different departments. So there's different ministries that run the government that are staffed with civil servants. And how you get a job in government is through an exam. So an emperor claims the mandate of heaven. There's a centralized bureaucracy as opposed to a decentralized system. And how you get a job in government is by taking an exam. Those are 3 continuities that you should know for every single dynasty, minus a brief period for the Mongols who decide to have a different way, which we'll talk about in a second. All right, so the next topic.
I'm going to jump in right before we go to the next topic. A lot of students are asking, what is a bureaucracy? So a bureaucracy is the actual people that run the government. So not necessarily the military and not necessarily the family that is the monarch or the emperor, but rather the different departments that collect taxes or that build roads or that build great walls or that build the Grand Canal. And of course, then pay all the employees that do all of that. So big governments like the United States have huge bureaucracies, but we're talking about a time period where there was a lot of societies that did not have bureaucracies. They did not have a big government. So I just wanted to jot that in. There's a lot of people asking that question.
That's great. Yes, thank you for that, because this term bureaucracy is really important, because you might be asked to compare different kinds of states. Some of them are centralized and have these bureaucracies that run the different functions of government, and some of them will be more decentralized. So you'll get to compare those. In terms, like for example, Western Europe at this time was very decentralized. So the Song dynasty, probably there's a lot of things that are wonderful and interesting to talk about for each of these dynasties, but we're only going to tell you the things we think might be on the exam. So at this point, we really have to strip everything down to what do you need to know? For the Song dynasty, this is the time of like economic, incredible, it's sometimes been referred to as a commercial revolution. I've heard some people talk about it as like proto-capitalistic, but this is a time of the thriving economy. The population is booming because of the introduction of like new food in terms of, for example, champa rice, which was a strain of rice that could double the harvest. It could have like 2 harvests because it could be grown year round. That was found when the Tang expanded, actually, who became the Song dynasty. Who preceded the Song dynasty. They found it in northern Vietnam. They took it and they planted it. So the point is, you have more food, which means more people. People are moving to cities. There's also a lot of innovations in terms of iron production, which leads to, I've also heard people talk about it as like a manufacturing revolution, because there's just such an uptick in iron, which is all being exported and used in order to make these like incredible products, not just weapons and armor, but also bells, as you can see in the picture, for like Buddhist architecture. This is a time in which the government is very involved in facilitating commercial production. They print paper money. That's something that's going to continue after the Song dynasty as well. And they create infrastructure to facilitate trade. So when you think about economic production, think about large numbers of large numbers of goods being produced for export, lots of trade, people moving to cities, urbanization. And the map that's here on the slide is the Grand Canal, which connected the Yellow River to the Yangtze River in the south. So now you really have all of this territory exchanging, and the economy is thriving. And that is because of specific government policies that are encouraging economic development. So that's really, what you need to know about the Song dynasty in terms of their economy. Yeah, you could say that the Song was part of the Golden Age. You could, beginning the Tang is considered one of the high points of Chinese cultural production. But the Song dynasty, they're known as an economic powerhouse. The river in the north is called the Yellow River, and the river in the south is the Yangtze River. The Grand Canal is a canal that connects these two. The north of China is the capital. It's always been the political center of China. Well, not always, okay, but for the most part, like dating back to sort of early river valley civilizations, it's the political capital. But the south is really economically productive. So you connect the two, big economic growth. In terms of culture, the thing to know about East Asia during this time is Confucianism remains very important. And in fact, Confucianism becomes such a core part of Chinese identity. It's something that had, of course, dates back before the Song dynasty, but becomes a core part of Song culture. And then after the Mongol conquest, it gets reinvigorated in the Ming dynasty. So Mr. Dramby, or BJ, is going to take you through a document in a second. But the other thing I want to mention is that Chinese culture at this time really spreads to Japan and to Korea. In terms of where is East Asia, you see at the top of the slide, it says developments in East Asia from 1200 to 1450. There's only 3 countries to know in terms of East Asia, minus the Mongols who come in, right? So the Mongols are in Central Asia, and they're going to come into a lot of different places. But these 3 countries are China, Korea, and Japan. If you're asked a question about East Asia, think about China, Korea, and Japan. And there is cultural diffusion that happens. So cultural diffusion meaning from China to Korea and Japan, you have the spread of these Confucian ideas, and also the spread of Buddhism. By the time you get to the Song Dynasty, Buddhism is the most popular religion, even though, and Confucianism and Buddhism are complementary, but Buddhism is the most popular religion in China. Not necessarily complementary, but they can coexist. And so Confucianism remains important, but Buddhism becomes very popular. And there's specific strands of Buddhism, like Chan Buddhism, which emphasizes meditation, which becomes very popular during this time. In Japan, when it spreads to Japan, it becomes known as Zen Buddhism. So for culture during this time period, know that there's the reinvigoration and importance of Confucianism and the continuing spread of Buddhism, which makes its way from China to Korea and Japan. This term, hopefully you're familiar with this term, syncretism. It's something that comes up a lot in world history, because when cultures are introduced to a new place, they are not static. It's not just that people adopt a new culture and then everything that came before disappears. There's a blending that happens. So religious syncretism is the blending of two or more religious belief systems into a new system, or the incorporation into a religious tradition of beliefs from an unrelated tradition. Oh, they're asking for captions for the video, which I believe is possible with the Google Slides. So we'll go ahead and try to do that.
So Shift Control C.
I think that should do it with the captions.
I don't see it.
All right, so one thing I wanted to mention about religious syncretism is how it applies to East Asia at this time. It is that Confucianism has a very long-standing old, has an old history within China, that when Buddhism comes into China, that it is something that is blended. There are aspects of Buddhism and Taoism that are co-opted and incorporated into Confucianism, and there's several thinkers that take these ideas and infuse them into Confucianism, which is why when we talk about Confucianism, we talk about Neo-Confucianism, because it's sort of like the latest and greatest version of Confucianism, adapting to the popularity and introduction of Buddhism. The most famous Neo-Confucian thinker for the Song Dynasty is Zhu Xi, and that's the document on the next slide.
Excellent. So I'm struggling to get the captions up.
I'll go ahead and look into that as well.
Thank you. So what we're going to do today is take a break from just, I guess you would say, straight content and say to ourselves, how would we use that content? How would College Board put this content on the test? Because they're not going to just make us write a definition. I mean, we're too good for that. So here is an example, and here is a document. Zhu Xi, a Song philosopher, the preface to The Great Learning by chapter and phrase around 1200. Now you're like, I've never read this, and that's okay. They're purposely going to select documents that you've never read. They just want to give you documents that you can understand or figure out. So let's read this on our own. And after you've read it, the question I'm going to ask is, how does China view power? How does one have power in China based off of this document? So I'll give everybody a moment just to go ahead and type something in the chat.
And while they're doing that,
Thank you, Maddie. Okay, a lot of you are having a good answer. Wow, somebody spoke with a different word. But let's stop using mandate of heaven and put mandate of heaven in your own words. Natural, love, divine. Kate, I'm asking very simply, how does one have power in China?
BJ, did you see the information about how to get the captions? I know there's, if you hover over the bottom left of the slides and click the 3 dots, then it will toggle captions. There you go. Wait, the bottom left. Go back into presenter view. There's a few people in public, so they want to be able to follow along, but they can't have their sound on. Right there. And caption preferences, it's right underneath autoplay. I think it is toggle captions.
So I've seen a lot of good words, and you'll notice that I've been extra patient because so many of you were saying mandate of heaven. That is a option. That is an answer. But I want us also to look at the fact that in East Asia, there is a certain value given to being, quote unquote, intelligent and wise. So you're not just given power, you have to earn that power. And to earn that power, it's by being wise, being intelligent, it's having the right decorum, it's valuing and promoting education, it's being well read. All I'm doing right now is I'm looking through the document for examples to support that. So you need to get away from the 3-word answer, mandate of heaven, and say, what does that even mean? Because in an SAQ or an LEQ, they're going to want you to embellish and not just understand a vocab that you read on Quizlet. So yes, East Asia, very, very, very easy way to gain power is by earning it through learning, through being considered wise, by being respected by others, let alone gaining legitimacy from the people and the quote unquote God or gods. Very good. Thank you very much, all of you that chopped in. I was giving you a lot of extra time because I wanted to hear a lot more ideas. Now, on the opposite of that is Feudal Japan. So Feudal Japan is still 1.1 East Asia, but its type of government was a lot more based off of wealth and land and power. So Japan is feudal. It did try the civil service exams. It did try to be Confucian, but it didn't take on. Feudalism here has a lot of landed aristocracy. These landed people, they're called the daimyo. The daimyo have these huge swaths of land. And on that land are the workers or serfs in the feudal system. These landed, rich, powerful daimyo compete with each other to be the strongest, I have to show my muscles, strongest daimyo, which we call the shogun. They fight for power. Now, to have themselves fight each other, they need to have the tools, the troops, the army, and they need to pay samurai. So samurai are hired mercenaries. Please do not look at the samurai as these noble beings. They will fight to the death for you because you paid for it. So the samurai are warriors fighting for daimyos, fighting maybe even for the emperor. Peasants sometimes had to join with the daimyo to fight because they lived on the daimyo's land. And whatever daimyo you had that was the strongest would be the shogun. The Tokugawa shogunate we'll be learning about in Unit 3. Now, why I'm being extra dramatic here. In China, the idea was mandate of heaven, learning, knowledge. In feudal Japan, it's fighting each other. I'm the best because I killed you. You're dead. So I want to show you the contrasting differences in East Asia alone. Now we're going to take a big jump on the other side of Afro-Eurasia in a region called Dar al-Islam.
Okay, and at the end of this section, we're going to do a little comparison exercise, and Mr. Dranby is going to walk you through comparing the political systems in China or in East Asia and in Dar al-Islam. So at the end of this cram session, the idea is that you not only have reviewed these key terms, but that you're also able to apply it with one of the AP historical thinking skills. So let's look at the Islamic world, or Dar al-Islam. The first thing is to know that it spread pretty widely in the period from 1200 to 1450. Islam, as you may know, is a religion that emerges in the 7th century in the Arabian Peninsula. And by the time you get to 1200, it has spread pretty significantly, not just through military expansion. It's not just that the successors to Muhammad with their armies, with their nomadic armies, burst forth, spread throughout the Middle East into like North Africa and all the way to Persia. But then from there, Islam spreads much more widely through trade. That is really one of the key learning objectives of this time period. It's not just military conquest. I've heard it said Islam is not only the religion of the sword, it's actually the religion of the merchant. And this is a time period in which Islam spreads from North Africa to West Africa through the trans-Saharan trade routes, and then all throughout the Indian Ocean to port cities in India, along the east coast of Africa, to different parts of Southeast Asia because of the Muslim merchant diaspora. So the theme of why it says Dar al-Islam, the Islamic world, and not the Middle East, is because it really refers to this period of time in which the Islamic world is much more than the Middle East, because it has spread not just through conquest, but through trade. And that is why this unit is talking about the Islamic world rather than a particular more narrow region. So let's look at some of the things that are going on in the Islamic world. So the first thing I want to mention is politics. Again, like with China, if you're thinking about continuities, things that stay the same throughout time, you can think about culture as kind of your first go-to. Like generally, cultural activities, the way that individuals organize their lives, their communities, are informed by religion and cultural beliefs. But states rise and fall all the time in world history. And so political change, the rise and fall of states is happening at a really large scale in this period, 1200 to 1450. You have 3 8s, caliphate, sultanate, and a khanate. 3 different types of empires in this time period. The good news for the following time periods is that there's just basically the Ottomans, and then, or some big empires, big early modern empires that fall after World War I. But for this time period, 1200 to 1450, you have a lot of change. The change begins with the Abbasid Caliphate really entering into a period of decline. By the time we get to 1200, the Abbasid Caliphate had kind of already seen its glory days of the past. The College Board has decided to scoop all of the glory days into this curriculum. The glory days of the Islamic Golden Age or a little bit earlier. But the Abbasid Caliphate actually lasts from 750 to 1258. A caliphate is an Islamic empire ruled by a caliph. And spoiler alert, a sultanate is an empire ruled by a sultan. And a khanate is an empire ruled by a Khan. And these titles are just the names of the emperors. They're the names of the monarchs. But the names have meaning. So a caliphate is a successor to Muhammad. It has religious significance. It is not just that it's a political leader. Muhammad was not just a political leader. It is also a religious leader. So a caliphate, the person who, a caliph ruling over an empire, is claiming a type of political legitimacy, like the mandate of heaven. It's a political legitimacy that relies on, in this case, religion, that they are the rightful successors to Muhammad. They also, an important thing about the Abbasid Caliphate is they sponsored intellectual development. When you think about the Chinese dynasties in this time period, think about them sponsoring economic development. When you think about the Islamic world, think about them sponsoring intellectual development. An example is, in this case, the House of Wisdom. And I think there's a little bit more about that in the next topic. The House of Wisdom. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in subsequent slides. But first, I want to talk about because we're looking at the difference between a sultanate and a caliphate, which is your question here. A sultanate is an Islamic empire at this time that only claims political authority. So the caliph is still around. There's a caliph who claims religious authority, claims to be able to interpret Islamic law, claims to be the leader of like all Muslims throughout the world, right? The worldwide community of Muslims, the Ummah. But a sultanate is a political leader. The sultanate's, the sultan is the one who is making the decisions, who is making policy. And this model of the sultanates coming into the Middle East at this time in the 11th century and 12th century is because the Turks came in. It's particularly the sultan in this time period is a Turk, a Turkic leader. We don't say Turkish, we say Turkic because there's lots of different like Turkic ethnic groups. And so comes into this time period, there's 3 different sultanates in the AP World History curriculum that they mention as illustrative examples. You don't need to memorize everything there is to know about the Seljuks. You just need to know that as the Abbasid Caliphate enters into a period of decline, it starts to fragment and lose control over the different territories. It controlled this vast territory that was the Islamic world, right? Much of the Islamic world outside of like Africa and Southeast Asia. There was this really expansive all throughout North Africa, all the way into Persia, this Islamic empire, a caliphate, but it starts to lose control and fragment into smaller states. And although the caliph is still around and doesn't die, the sultanate is the one, the Turks come in and they set up sultanates. And so there is a sultan in charge in much of the Islamic world who's making political decisions, not the caliph. In Persia, it's the Seljuk Sultanate. In North India, it's the Delhi Sultanate. In Egypt, it's the Mamluk Sultanate. But in all 3 cases, you have a Turkic Islamic empire ruled by a sultan. And then finally, the last political change in the Islamic world from 1200 to 1450 is that the Mongols come in and just defeat the Seljuks and actually kill the Abbasid Caliph. So, and Khanate is something that we're going to talk a little bit more about next time. Not next time. We're going to talk a little bit more about it in subsequent slideshows when we talk about Unit 2. Because the Mongols are not in Unit 1. They're in the same time period, 1200 to 1450, but they are in Unit 2. So we're going to get through Unit 1, have our quiz break, and then we're going to circle back to the Mongols. But what I want you to know for just this particular part is the difference between a caliphate and the sultanate and the relationship between them. The Abbasid Caliphate's in charge, going along, doing really well, controls lots of territory. All these kinds of intellectual innovations are happening. And then it starts to enter a period of decline, and the Turks come in and they start to take over and establish their own empires and make decisions. The caliph's around, has religious authority, but the sultans, the Turks, are in charge. And we'll circle back to the Mongols. So in terms of what the Abbasids are doing, the one thing that the College Board wants you to know for the AP World History curriculum is that they sponsor all sorts of intellectual development. And it's not just the Abbasids. I mean, in Cairo and Cordoba, all throughout the Islamic world, in various places in Persia, There are thinkers, scientists who are innovating. In this particular case, I use the example of the House of Wisdom because I've seen it come up on the AP World Test more than any other example of intellectual innovation. And the House of Wisdom was created in 9th century Baghdad. There was a caliph at the time, Caliph Al-Mahmud, who had a dream. And in his dream, supposedly, Aristotle comes to him and says that he is carrying on the legacy of the great thinkers of the past. And so that he needs to create and build this institute in order to have that mission. And that's what he does. The House of Wisdom is a translation institute. They hire the best and the brightest minds at the time. They get the ancient Greek texts, Roman texts, Sanskrit texts, all that incredible math knowledge that had happened under the earlier golden age of the Gupta, and they take it and they translate it and then they build upon it. And so all of that knowledge is then going to be translated and taken by the Europeans in the 12th and 13th century. And then it gets written into the curriculum, and then it gets put into the university. And now you are learning algebra. And so that is the story of this incredible decision by the Abbasids to sponsor intellectual innovation, this incredible intellectual transmission of knowledge from the Greeks, the Romans, the Sanskrits, this classical knowledge into the Islamic world in the medieval period. And then finally, through the Europeans, through the Renaissance, bringing it here to us. You can blame calculus on Newton, but it's really the Abbasids' fault that you are learning algebra. So that is transfer. All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Dramby.
So unfortunately for Dr. Posa, she doesn't have the fun of listening to her and reading the chat. Sometimes they are off task, but mostly they take what you're saying, they go off these little tangents that are extremely healthy. So I'm enjoying myself. Thank you all. So what I wanted to do right now is just kind of like have a very simple religious moment, a definition of Islam. So this is disrespectful to summarize a faith in 2 minutes, but let's go for it. It's a religion of the Muslims, a monotheistic faith as revealed through Muhammad as the prophet of Allah. So a couple of things I think are important about Islam for you to know is, number one, Islam actually translates into submission. A Muslim is one that submits, meaning the faith of the Islamic world, Dar al-Islam, is devoted. It's devoted to its faith, its God, its teachings, its hadiths, its traditions. And we have to understand that and truly respect that, because it actually explains some of the choices made by people over the last 1,000 years. I mean, when you look at the Quran, it translates into recitation. It is the recited words said by the Prophet Muhammad over years, but they're the words of God, words of Allah, meaning they are literal. They are not to be said, Moses wrote this, Moses was divinely inspired. It is, no, this is the word, not of man, but the word of God. In fact, because of that, the Quran should always be written in Arabic as it was stated in Arabic through Muhammad, which means anywhere Islam spreads through trade, Arabic spreads as well. So you can see as we get into Unit 2 how the faith of Islam is a very uniting faith. It is a faith that spreads language, traditions, and obviously beliefs around the Indian Ocean Trade Network, which is where we're going to head. So I just wanted to have just a definition there of a faith, because I think some of those words do matter. Now, with that, second on the faith and all the slides that Dr. Posa has gone into, I want to do another document analysis. This is very purposeful. So this document is by Ibn Said. He is a 1200 Spanish Muslim. He's a writer who has seen Islam spread from the Middle East through North Africa into Spain, as many of you know, Al-Andalus. So it is a faith that has spread very quickly. He writes a book called the Book of the Maghrib. The Maghrib translates into West. It means the western part of the Islamic world, or the western part of Dar al-Islam. So once again, I'm going to ask you that question. It's a very simple question. How does Ibn Said say power is gained in the Islamic world, or how power is taken in the Islamic world, or basically what is their view of power? So I'll give you a moment to read this. This one's a little bit longer, and there are words you don't need to know. So just read through them. I'll see you in about a minute and a half till you start blowing up the chat. Well, we have an answer. Another answer. It is blurry. So my question was, for those who are just jumping in, how is power obtained in Dar al-Islam per Ibn Said's writing? And if you look at it, he's talking about Cordoba, he's talking about the western part of Dar al-Islam, and he's absolutely talking about military conquest. He's talking about people desiring to be better than others, take from others. You will notice that in the third line, it talks about expeditions against the Christians. So you can even see that there is religious conflict. I mean, this is going to be around the time period of the Crusades. So I wanted to show you China earlier, how they view power through one author. This is another author, how they view power. And all of that is to get you ready for this. Now it's time to compare. Based on the documents and the background materials we've given, I've given you a prompt, and I want you to think of a Venn diagram for a second. Compare the systems of political authority in dynastic China and Dar al-Islam from 1200 to 1450. So I want you to think about it. First of all, we're comparing similarities and differences. We're not talking about faith. Do not talk in detail about belief structures. Talk about how those belief structures impact political authority. That is why we talk about SPICE T, social, political, interaction with the environment, economic, and technological. Cultural should have been in there too. So take a second and in the chat, state a similarity. In the chat, state a difference. And we're not editing the documents we're sharing. You just have to make a copy, everybody. Margaret's getting down. You're breaking it down. Make it simple, everybody. What is a similarity? What is a difference? As simple as you can go. So I will tell you all a little secret. In my classroom, because we're about to go to the next level, in my classroom, I like to tell my students, anytime you're going to state a similarity, use the word both. Both Dr. Posa and Mr. Dranby are teachers. So using the word both sets up a similarity. Then there's the difference. For that, I tell my students, anytime you're about to state a difference, use the word while. While Mr. Dranby, oh no, where am I going to go with this? While Mr. Dranby prefers to write with a red pen, Dr. Posa likes to write with a very large, oversized pencil. Okay,
You
there it
have
is.
to give me that pencil now,
I have no
That looks
idea.
like a great pencil. I'm pretty sure I need that pencil.
Don't know why I have that. So I'm a big fan. It's like one of those helpful hints that you're not going to get maybe with other learning platforms. Saying the word while means you now know how to start your sentence. Saying the word both means now you know how to start the sentence. All you need to do is finish the sentence. Because you came here on our live session, you now know how to start a sentence. So let's go to our final task in this. Let's do a thesis. Although systems of political authority in dynastic China and Dar al-Islam were similar in blank, they differed in blank. So take my thesis and tweak it a little bit and fill in the blanks. You've already been writing it in the chat. This is an although approach. I love it. You've all paused in the chat. Try to use the word although to start. Taven, good comment. Got your back, Aya. Oh, who was that? Bashar, you're going to get a like emoji. Bashar just earned a like emoji. Thumbs up. Try to stay away from words like culture and economics if that's the only word you're going to say. They were similar in how they gained power from culture, but differed in how they viewed economics. That is too vague or ambiguous. So I would say to my students, what do you mean by that? The word culture. What do you mean by that? The word economics. I will tell you, there is no real formula for writing a thesis, as much as you just need to know that you can take 2 or 3 sentences, have them next to each other, and that can be considered a thesis. You don't have to write 40-word sentences. Your thesis can be 3 or even 4 sentences. As an AP reader, I've seen that. Thank you very much. I'm seeing great work. So for those who are struggling with this, read through the chat and you're going to find that people are crushing it. Thank you so much. So I want to jump here and we're going to head to South and Southeast Asia.
Great, wonderful. I think that's a great structure and great practice, something you can do with a lot of different prompts, just follow that formula. So, and there was a question in the chat about the extent to which the Islamic empires were centralized. Certainly the Abbasid Empire was more centralized than the Seljuk states. I'm sorry, not the Seljuks, the Sultanates. Generally, like Turkic political models tend to leave local leaders in place and be a bit more decentralized. So you can think about centralized versus decentralized as a spectrum and argue that some states are more centralized than others. You don't even need to use it kind of as a centralized or not binary. You can say that the Chinese dynasties were highly centralized, the Abbasids had a degree of centralization, and these Turkic sultanates were less centralized. Just there was that question. All right, let's talk about South and Southeast Asia. In later periods, they're separated because they are two different regions. But for this time period, 1200 to 1450, there's one particular learning objective that they really want you to focus on, and that is the intersection of politics and culture. So let's look at what it is the College Board really wants you to know. This is about how culture informs politics, and it's actually very similar to what we've been talking about. How do people claim the right to rule? What makes it so that one person who has all the power and tells a vast number of people to build a huge, expensive, religious monument, how do they have that much power? And it usually is that they have to justify their power through religion. In this case, the religion that informs Southeast Asia comes from South Asia, and it is Hinduism and Buddhism. There's a variety of different Hindu Buddhist states. Now, when you think of South Asia, think of the Indian subcontinent. There's a couple of different countries in the Indian subcontinent. Most of them don't exist before 1947 in terms of those borders. But the Indian subcontinent more broadly is what they're talking about when they say South Asia. So you can, if you want, for shorthand, say India. Although we all know that the Indian subcontinent does have more than just India. And we can't forget Sri Lanka. So that is South Asia. And South Asia is the origin of Hinduism and Buddhism. And like we were talking about with some of the other before, is that culture spread through trade. So from South Asia trading with Southeast Asia, then you have the diffusion of Hinduism and Buddhism into Southeast Asia. There's a lot of different Hindu and Buddhist states in South and Southeast Asia. If you're wondering where Southeast Asia is, it is to the east of South Asia and to the south of East Asia. Yeah, so that, if you could just visualize it, it makes sense. Everything south of China is Southeast Asia. That includes Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, going into Malaysia, and then you have the maritime states of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, Brunei, Philippines. So there's a lot of different countries, but it's basically everything south of China. China's East Asia. Everything south of China is Southeast Asia. So in Southeast Asia, coming from South Asia, you have Hinduism and Buddhism, which are part of justifying the ruler, the legitimacy of the ruler, right? The right to rule. That's just what legitimacy is, the right to rule. And this concept of a god king is really important for that. So in this case, the Deva Raja literally just means god king, is that the ruler of a state in Southeast Asia I don't know, you put in the chat your favorite Southeast Asian state. You could say, for example, I don't know, Srivijaya, Majapahit, or the Khmer. There's a lot of them. You don't have to know every single state and every detail about every state. But there is a variety of different states. What you need to know is that the ruler of these states uses Hinduism or Buddhism in order to justify their rule and as part of providing some sort of cultural unity. So for example, Majapahit. Many of you like Majapahit. And I see here some other Srivijaya. For Srivijaya, it was Buddhism. But the idea is that religion provided a unifying factor, either Buddhism or Hinduism, and that the king claimed to be reincarnated God, a Hindu god, a Buddhist god. You had Hindu Brahmins, so religious officials at the court of the kings. It's just another example of how religion is used to reinforce political legitimacy. But in this case, instead of Islam, the religion is Hinduism and Buddhism. The Khmer, I see a lot of the Khmer in the chat. The Khmer are interesting because they're Hindu and then they're Buddhist. But they last a really long time, like all throughout, I think like 800 to 1300. The Khmer Empire, just like modern day Cambodia. And they're a great example of an empire that is using religion in order to create this really interesting, powerful, dynamic civilization from 1200 to 1450 in this time period. All right, well, there's a great question about when did Islam start to spread to Southeast Asia? And I just want to say two quick things. One, there is a Muslim merchant diaspora, which means that even before Islam is a majority religion, for example, in Indonesia, you still have these pockets, right? In any port city, you would find a merchant diaspora. There's a couple of different ethnic groups, but one, the Muslim merchant diaspora in different port cities throughout the Indian Ocean. When you have the transition from the end of Majapahit at the beginning, like 1200 to 1450, toward the end of that period, Majapahit declines in like what we call modern day Indonesia, the territory that controls the Malacca, and you have a sultanate. This is the Sultanate of Malacca. And actually, the Strait of Malacca is named after the Sultanate of Malacca, not the other way around. So Islam, it's really toward the end of this period, 1200 to 1450, that you see the introduction of a state that uses Islam. Today, Indonesia is the #1 most populous Muslim country in the world. And that happens at the end of this time period with the establishment of the Sultanate of Malacca. And then shortly thereafter, the Portuguese come in, but that's next period. So here's some examples of this like syncretism, the blending of Hindu and Buddhist traditions. So as I said before, this is a lot of cultural blending where you don't just have one religion and then another one comes in and then another one comes in. There's like these lingering elements that all fuse together. And that is most represented in architecture. Art and architecture represent different traditions, different cultures. That's South and Southeast Asia. We just have a couple more places to visit from 1200 to 1450, and then we can move into a quiz break.
So we're going to talk about the Americas, 1200 to 1450, changing gears a bit, but we're still looking at how do the Americas find and define their governmental systems. So at the end of the day, I know we're going to different places and they seem so different, but the question is, how are they unified? What is their theme? Is it a religion that unifies them? Is it trade that unifies them? So in state building in the Americas, we have a variety of different regional powers. I will tell you, I do not demand out of my students a mastery of all of these at all. So I hit the Mexica, which I use the term Aztecs, and the Inca the most. And they've done well on the AP exams. So in the Americas, when we look at the Mexica or the Aztecs, the Mexica are the people that came and helped create what was referenced the Aztec Empire for a long time. You will see that a lot of spiced tea is used. That's why it's highlighted on this page. Political interaction with the environment, cultural, and economics help define the backbone. So let's get ready to go. On the left-hand side, we have Chinampas. All right, not champa rice, Chinampas. So Chinampas are these, we often call them, reference them as floating islands. What I want you to think about is in Lake Texcoco, don't ask, Lake Texcoco, they are backfilling into their brackish water soil and refuge, dirt, and more. And these are great fertile areas to then plant. And you could have numerous planting seasons on these Chinampas. Somebody mentioned it. Tenochtitlan, the middle picture, is built as these Chinampas are built, and then they get backfilled, and then they get people live on it, so they have to build more Chinampas. And Lake Texcoco is now having a larger landmass in its middle, and that is Tenochtitlan, which by the time Cortez comes, it is one of the largest cities, most populated cities on Earth. Larger, more populated than London, just to say. Now, why do Chinampas matter? Well, in terms of interaction with the environment, that's one. Number two, they also now can have more people. When you have more food, you can have more people. So the population of the Aztec Empire expands. And people are finding that they have more free time to not farm, so they can have different jobs. And yes, some of those jobs are soldiers. On the right-hand side, Ethan's giving a shout out for my very in-depth comment. Thank you. On the right-hand side, you will see how the Aztecs took their food, their stomachs, and then were able to make an empire out of it, and it's the tribute system. So what they did in the Aztec Empire is they went to other city-states. By the way, my wife is the most amazing person on earth, okay? I just wanted to make sure you all knew that right now. So what they did is they would take their army, a very well-fed army, send them to these city-states and say, all right, we could conquer you, but we're not going to. You're going to give us tribute, probably in the form of 2, 3, or 30 of your strongest men. We are going to take them, and they're going to be our soldiers, quasi-slaves, or they might even be our sacrifices, as you see in the image there. In Tenochtitlan, they had numerous temples devoted to human sacrifice. So if you've ever watched The Hunger Games and you've thought of Katniss, you know, basically Hunger Games stole the entire series from the Aztecs. Now, the thing is, all of this political might, territorial gain, the sacrifice, the ripping out of hearts and bringing them up to Huitzilopochtli, the sun god, promising for the sun to come out the next day, which, by the way, it does, not because of the bloody heart, because the earth rotates, but all of this is on the back of full stomachs. You can't have an army if they're not fed, and this is why you should never invade Russia in the winter. So I just want to make sure you understand the connectivity between these visuals. So let's take a second, and this may be too hard for you to see. So if you are able to zoom in, we're going to do a stimulus-based practice question. This is a map of Chinampas. It is drawn in the mid-1500s. There is questions 1, 2, and 3. This is how I teach it to my students. You read the source, you read the questions, then you go and read the actual document, then you answer the question. This should take you 3 minutes because there are 3 questions. So if you're able to make this out, let's dive in. Aztec Chinampas are an example of let me know when you have number 1 done. As you're answering, the source is always going to be provided by College Board. The source is, where did this come from? Who is the author? What gender, what nationality, what profession, whatever the College Board finds important. Okay, next question. The likely purpose of this type of drawing is to So question number 1 is talking about interaction with the environment. Question number 2 is about purpose, which is one of the famous hips. Question number 3, you guys are doing great. Question number 3, the Chinampas caused, so this is a causation question. The Chinampas caused the Aztecs to be able to and there we go. So these 3 questions are what you might face on a College Board test. They ask you to use your spice tea knowledge. They ask you to use hip skills like purpose. They ask you to use historical thinking skills and reasoning skills like causation. So we're doing good. We're doing good. You're getting the right answers. So good job for you. Now, let's stick with the Aztecs, and we're not going to write anything here. We don't have that type of time, but this could be a visual on the AP exam, and these could be questions you would face on an SAQ. So an SAQ that you will see on the exam is going to have 3 parts, an A, B, and C. Parts A often ask you to identify. Parts B and C might say identify, but they might also say identify and explain. If your teacher ever taught you the ACE approach, you want to use the ACE approach on B and C's when you have to explain things. So identify how geography impacted the Aztecs. Now, everybody knows that that is not a picture of geography, but they're hoping that you can make the connection between the tribute system, the power of the Aztecs, to Chinampas. Letter B, identify and explain the religious purpose. This is where we're going to say that as a theocracy, where political and religious power is united, the idea was if we sacrifice these humans, the sun will come out. And if we don't sacrifice these humans, the people won't have the sun. The people need us. And finally, political. People are going to obey the Aztec, the largest city-state of Tenochtitlan, because of the tribute system. As the Aztecs are always looking for tributes, they will need to behave so they don't get punished by having to give more tributes. So I just wanted to throw out how we would use today's mini lesson on the Aztecs in both a stimulus-based multiple choice and an SAQ. What is HRS? Historical reasoning skills. These are the causes, the changes in continuities, the things that we think about, the contextualizations, the things that you're going on in your head outside of the content. So here's just a definition of tributary system. Pre-modern state in a particular type of subordinate relationship to a more powerful blah, blah, blah. Okay, remember the examples. I don't like the definition, right? It's when a superior demands something out of an inferior. In China, China demanded Korea, Japan, and Vietnam to pay tribute, usually in the form of food, wealth, women. I mean, it can be graphic. In the other one, the Aztecs and regional city-states, that's the story I just told you. They're both tributary systems where the inferior owes something called tribute to the superior. There it is. So keep that in your back pocket. Now, to the south of the Aztecs, we have the Inca. We are in Unit 1 still. In the Inca, they used terrace farming to interact with the environment. They built their cities on top of the mountains of the Andes, Machu Picchu, for example. And they also built roads using meta labor to connect north and south. It was a very bureaucratic, socialist system where everybody owed some labor to the government. It's called terrace farming, not terrorist farming. Terrace farming is kind of like all over the world, and it's still used today. It's where you cut into a hillside like the Andes Mountains, and you make little strips of flat land. Once you have flat land, then you could plant. Planting on a hillside leads to erosion. And here we go. Erosion is bad. Thanks, Melissa, for deciphering my enunciation. All right. A lot of you are diving into the SAQs, and we're going to have a whole night where we do SAQs. There's going to be a whole night where we're going to do hips. I know, it's keeping you right there on the edge of your seat. Africa. So for Africa, again, there's a variety of different powers. All of your teachers pick and choose what powers they go into more detail in. I go into detail on Mali, and I talk about the Swahili coast in my classroom with like a mention of Great Zimbabwe. So here, I just want to talk about geography and how it matters and how it leads to different forms of unification. So that is one of the wealthiest men ever to walk this earth. His name is Mansa Musa. He is sitting there with gold in his hand and gold on his head because the Mali kingdom was united in their wealth of gold, which they traded with Europe for years, even before there were the Mali. They also were unified as a faith-based nation. They were Islamic. They built mosques. They built schools, they built libraries. Timbuktu will want to be your city for that. I'm being pretty quick here. Why geography matters is because Mali is in West Africa, but it's an Islamic dominant wealth power. So how did that come into being? Well, first, it is tied to the trade networks with the Middle East and Europe. And those trade networks allow a certain amount of connectivity that allows for Islam to spread, gold to be traded, thus Mali to thrive for a few hundred years. So it's from the Mali we have Ibn Battuta and Mansa Musa. We'll be talking about Ibn Battuta in at a different lesson. Now, on the opposite side, that's Greater Zimbabwe. Greater Zimbabwe is one of many city-states in East Africa along the Indian Ocean. It is not unified empires. It is regional city-states and their surrounding territories. Now, what unifies them? Drink coffee. What unifies them is the Swahili language. The Swahili language is a Bantu derivative. The Bantu migration is a language that spread north to south, west to southeast. Thus, all the different languages spoken along the eastern coast of Africa, some of that stuff translates easily. And now the people of East Africa, not united as a kingdom, but united by language, can trade with each other and trade with the rest of the Indian Ocean trade network. Thus, geography helps them because of the spread of language. So these are just some random thoughts to hit upon. Obviously, we can go a lot deeper. Once again, we're going to have another question set. So here is 1, 2, and 3. This is a great mosque. I'm a big fan of this one because it's a mosque built out of sand. So yeah, that's cool. You will see pillars coming out horizontally, and that's because they put wooden planks on those pillars that are horizontal in order to always and constantly refresh this sand mosque. So it looks like letter C is number 1. Let's go to number 2. The effect of building structures like this is, I'm already on number 2. And mud, yes. Sand and mud, dirt. Lots of people are liking A, and some people are liking C for number 2. Increase in trade between faiths as more and more faiths build their local structures. Or increase in urbanization of a society of people flock to these religious centers. I'm going to go with C. And finally, besides the expansion of Dar al-Islam south to Mali, where else did Muslims extend their faith? So this is contextualization. And I'm going to assume Al-Andalus is going to be an answer there. Yes. Yes. So it's B for number 3. If you don't know anything about Al-Andalus, you need to Google it now. I could easily see them putting a visual from Cordoba on the AP exam. Iberian Peninsula, very good. So now we're going to jump to Europe. I'm going to jump out of this just for a second to see what number slide we're on. Cool. So Europe.
This is our last topic before the quiz.
I have a really, really hard time for Europe because of the Renaissance and the Reformation and all the things people want to learn that like sits there around 1450. So what we're going to try and do is simplify this. When I think of developments in Europe, we have social, political, interaction with the environment, cultural, economic, and technological. That is our spice tea. If I had to, and we're probably not going to have time for that activity, if I had to list a word or words to know for each of these, I would say the following. Social structure would be feudal. That is where you live your life and what class. Political, you're going to see consolidation, not in the form of empires, but in the form of regional powers. They're still trying to figure out what to do after the fall of Rome. Interaction with the environment is the plague that comes from East Asia and what it does to the very dirty, unbathed people of Western Europe. The cultural, I have the role of the Roman Catholic Church. In the absence of political power, the Catholic Church emerges 1300 as the voice of reason, as the voice of unity, as the voice of a language people would write and speak from. Economic would be serfdom. That is when people work their lives as serfs on a large manor. And finally, a technology could be the printing press that will help redefine different vernaculars or languages around Europe. So I just wanted to like simplify this because we can't go into it. And College Board knows that, everybody. College Board knows that if you really want in-depth on America, you take a push. You really want in-depth on Europe, you take Euro. I think it's time for a quiz break. So for those who are a little fried, it is time to jump on in. We're going to do a quiz break. Adeline, I'm hoping you're there. I was going to have you come on the screen and help monitor this. I will share my screen here. I need to go to our quiz. We're going to Unit 1 quiz. We're almost there. Just a little clicking around. All right. So for this, I'd encourage you all to either click the link or type that link in that I'm showing on the screen, or what I like to do is I get my phone out, I go to camera, and I take this quiz on my phone. So that's what I like to do. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing a quiz that is going to go over some of the content we taught tonight, but also some other things. Adeline, how's your audio working now? There she is. Need to unmute her. The quiz link has just been posted at the bottom of the screen. Adeline, are we going to be able to see you tonight? Oh, that's unfortunate. So I'm going to help narrate this. What we're going to be doing is we're going to take us through a quiz here. And I'm going to go ahead and start the quiz now. We're at 305 participants. There we go. There we go. There we go. Confucianism it is. One of the first lessons I teach my students. Next question. Awesome. Daimyo. I said it a bunch of times. Now, for those who said shoguns, shoguns is also an answer. Warlord rulers who fought each other were daimyo. The strongest of the daimyo were shoguns, and there usually was only one shogun at a time. Okay, everybody, I'm going to have to go faster now. So I've been letting a lot of you answer. I'm going to have to say, I'm going to let everybody have about 15 seconds and then reveal the answer. Here we go. Feeling good about ourselves now. Next question. All right, we're getting there. I'm liking it. I'm liking it. All right, good, good. Truth, truth, good job. All right, all right. Do you like our little jizya knowledge? Right? Nice. Next. Excellent. Excellent. So it is all about the word most. It's about the word most. The vast majority of people in South Asia are Hindu. Last question. We're just going to do one more. All right, for those who want to, make sure you learn the word mita, M-I-T-A. Good job, everybody. We're going to have to call that a little bit short because we have other things we need to get to tonight. So I was wondering, Dr. Amy, is there a chance that you could share the next few slides?
Yes, actually, I was thinking that this might be a good time because we were going to do a Q&A section where the students could come on and any sort of students could ask about this first unit, the questions, if they need any clarification, and just mix it up a little. Like, do you guys have any questions about how they tackled this unit. So are there any of the students who want to come on stage? And I will pull up the slides while we're doing that, but kind of turn it over to the students for a brief Q&A for about 3 minutes. What do you guys think? So we have Deb on the stage. Anybody else? Any of the other students want to come up? We got Promise. All right, Angela. Okay, I'm going to head back. And you guys, if you want to, Adeline, spend some time answering the questions.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and go into our questions tab. So if you look on the right side of your screen under where you've been writing in the chat this whole time, thanks for that, there is a little tab that looks just like the chat tab with a question mark in it. So that's going to be the questions tab. If you want to go there and write all your questions in here, there is a way better chance of us seeing it and answering your questions. So we would really appreciate that. And we're going to try to get to as many as possible. So the first question that I'm seeing is, what is urbanization? So urbanization is the movement into cities. Like, if you can think of like an urban landscape, like a cityscape sort of thing, and trying to build it up. And the more people and population, the greater the chance of urbanization. Anyone, anything to add?
You did a good job of covering it, Deborah, but yeah, it's kind of just like that movement, especially in this time, into smaller, more condensed spaces in those populations.
Yeah,
Okay,
honestly,
and
the only thing I would probably add to this is like always make sure to remember urbanization, because a lot of your topics are going to consistently be talked about on this, like throughout all the units.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true.
Okay, don't forget you guys can upvote questions in the Q&A tab that you guys want answered.
Yes. Thinking, should we put the question on the screen as we're answering, or should we just answer? What do you guys think? Okay. All right. There's a lot of questions that are about the format of our test, and then some content questions. So I think let's go over some more content things. So I see one about the Muslim diaspora that I'm going to put on the screen. Can you explain Muslim diaspora? All right. Someone want to start us off?
Okay, I guess I can. The biggest thing that you need to know about Muslim diaspora is we've of Southeast Asia and other parts of basically Asia. And the biggest things I feel like you should understand about this is that it was mainly through trade. We will later cover the Silk Road, which is going to be very crucial towards the Muslim diaspora, because that's one of the biggest reasons why people convert to Muslim. If you're like, yo, I want to trade with you, you would want to trade with people like you are like with, right? Like, you know, you can speak the same languages that you can vibe with. And that's basically what the the Muslim diaspora was. They wanted to trade because they were like same people. Not same people, but like the same culture.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And a lot of people who like weren't in that culture maybe interacted with some missionaries or like missionary-like people who would explain their ideas, and they would make it like really appealing to the masses. And people would be like, oh, you know what? I love that idea. Or, oh, you know what? Like that makes so much sense. And they would start to adapt this mindset and start to convert. And throughout the Silk Road, they would take those ideas and be like, yes. And then those people would spread it to their families and their families to their communities. And beyond that, they started spreading and spreading and spreading. And eventually just a whole diaspora occurred, spreading it throughout the world. And like today, even like we have it pretty much everywhere. Like it's pretty universal, right? All right. Adeline, anything else to add?
I think Adeline's frozen.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you very much for giving us a second for you to break down some things. We really, really appreciate it. I know for a fact, because I've been following the chat, that we've had our students helping you all in the chat. They're giving you likes, they're giving you some answers to your questions, and they're trying to keep the chat as focused as possible. But we're going to get back to things. I know a couple of you are noticing, boy, how are we going to finish 4 units? Trust me, Dr. Posa and I acknowledge that. But here, if you don't have a basis of China, Confucianism, then don't even bother moving on. You don't understand Darul Islam, Middle East, Abbasid, don't even bother moving on. So we kind of needed to go slow. I think we're going to pick it up now as we enter unit 2.
Okay, great. So one thing that BJ likes to say is that Unit 1 sets the stage for the players, and now we talk about how they interact. And so everything we do from this point, now that you have a good foundation in the Global Tapestry, as Unit 1 is called, we can now talk about like how that plays out as different people in different places come to the stage. So I'm going to move forward in the slideshow. Let's see, we are on slide 550. No, I'm just kidding. I gotta make myself laugh. Here we are in Unit 2, Networks of Exchange, which is, you'll notice the same time period, period 1, 1200 to 1450. So there's no like, other than the Mongols, no new characters that are introduced. They're mainly, this is about like how they interact. I'm going to kind of move through these questions pretty quickly. You'll see that on your packet, these are questions 13 through 20. And I really just want to focus in on the key learning objectives for this unit, because the next time period that we're covering in like the last hour is going to be 1450 to 1750, the early modern period, which is really interesting and we're excited to talk about. So for the next one, these are your networks of exchange.
Captions again, Amy. I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're commenting about captions.
Oh yeah, no, thank you for interrupting. I actually really appreciate it. So, does that work? Does that work? Okay. Any captions? No. That's all right. We can figure this out. Toggle captions.
There it is.
Okay, amazing.
Great.
New things. I'm learning all sorts of new things, which is great. I love to learn. So you have 3 trade routes, and let me see on the list. All right, so I'm going to talk briefly about the Mongols, and then BJ is going to talk about Indian Ocean trade and technologies. And then we will move on to a quiz and into the early modern period, wrapping up here in the next 15 minutes on Unit 1 or Unit 2, which concludes period 1, 1200 to 1450. All right, well, so there are several trade routes. The 3 main trade routes are the Silk Roads, the Trans-Saharan trade, and the Indian Ocean trade. Those are the big 3 that you need to know. We won't go through this too much, but so the overland trade routes are the Trans-Saharan trade routes and the Silk Roads. And the red here is Silk Roads. The yellow, okay, this is pretty simple information, but it is the Trans-Saharan trade route. You can see from North Africa connecting to West Africa, which is why Mansa Musa gets so wealthy from that salt and gold trade. And then finally, the purple trade route on the map, the Indian Ocean trade. I think it is important to work with maps, look and see where things are. That's really going to help you organize the information in your brain. The Indian Ocean trade route connects East Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Southeast Asia. So that's really important to keep in mind. But let's talk about the Mongols. The AP, the College Board loves to ask about the Mongols. You could have all sorts of, you could have a DBQ on the Mongols, you could have an SAQ on the Mongols, you could have, you know, all sorts of, you know, multiple choice questions. So the point is the Mongols are very important, but why are they important? It's because of the consequences. Yes, they were the largest empire in world history. Yes, there's a large number of people who are genetically related to Genghis Khan. all super interesting. But why do we care about the Mongols? It's because not necessarily everybody's going around speaking Mongolian language or even that we're continuing Mongolian culture, but it's because they revitalized overland trade routes, which led to this period that's sometimes known as like Pax Mongolica, because you have this belt of empires, this belt of Mongolian successor states that allow for trade. And where there is trade, where there are networks of exchange, there is technology that is moving from one region to another. There's culture that is moving from one region to another. So the diffusion of culture, the diffusion of technology, and the diffusion of disease. It is the Mongols, not totally like, it's not like they intended to, right? There is this particular story that they were throwing like diseased bodies over the walls of Vienna or something, but actually it was because of the interconnectedness of these trade routes. The Mongols conquered all of these places, and because of these conquests that they then ruled over, these Mongol successor states known as Khanates, then that leads to the spread of the Black Death in the 14th century, beginning in China, going across the Middle East, and then all of a sudden, within a couple of decades, 1/3 of the population of Europe dies of the bubonic plague. So the consequences of Mongol conquest is the revitalization of the Silk Roads, those overland trade routes, which because people are traveling from China to Europe, they are spreading not just technology like gunpowder and other kinds of knowledge like paper, also it is disease. So I mentioned the word Khanate, and that's pretty important. I don't know, BJ, if you want to talk about this map here, about the Catalan map.
Yeah, it's the same map that we showed Mansa Musa on earlier. And we need to understand that it's during the time of the Yuan dynasty, the Silk Road, the Mongol conquest, and Pax Mongolica that Marco Polo travels to China, comes back multiple times and tells his tale in his own autobiography. And the point I'm trying to share here is that was able to happen because the peace that the Mongols made. If you were to harass people on the Silk Road, the Mongols are going to lay you out because they want their trade route to move goods and their own soldiers. They don't want criminal bandits making a mockery and a mess of it all. So that's why I put that on.
All right, that's wonderful. I think that's really important. You have the, actually they provided security for the travelers, and that's really important. Not just that the Mongols revitalized overland trade, but how, right? That they did provide security so that they could facilitate this communication, which they benefited off of this trade. So what is a Khanate? It is one of the 3 eighths, as I mentioned earlier, which is an empire ruled by a Khan, right? The Caliphate is an empire ruled by a caliph, it's religious. Sultanate is an empire ruled by a sultan, that is a Turkic model of government where they claim political authority but not religious authority. And then finally, you have a Khanate, which is an empire ruled by a Khan. Of course, the first Khan is Genghis Khan. The person who was born Temujin takes the title Genghis Khan. It's actually pronounced Chinggis Khan, but it's fine. So it takes the title Genghis Khan in 1206, which means universal ruler of all the Mongol tribes. So a Khan is just a Mongol ruler who claims to be the great Khan claims to be the ruler of all the Mongol tribes. But what happened after Genghis Khan dies is his sons and grandsons continue those conquests. And then like Alexander the Great from a previous period, they set up these states, these like successor states. So a Khanate is a successor state, a Mongol state that is ruled by a descendant of Genghis Khan, either a son or a grandson. There are 4 major Khanates. I don't necessarily think you need to know in detail all of them, but I think that you do need to know 2 things in particular. It says here, compare 2 of the Khanates. 1, the Mongol Khanate takes a Chinese dynastic name called the Yuan Dynasty. So the Yuan Dynasty, which conquers the southern Song and is established in 1276, is a Mongol state. It is a Khanate, but it claims a Chinese dynastic rule. Like Kublai Khan is the leader of the Yuan Dynasty. He claims the mandate of heaven. He still has a distinctive Mongol identity, but he takes a Chinese dynastic name. So The three empires, or the three dynasties you need to know in East Asia, Song, Yuan, and Ming. The middle one is a Khanate. It's a Mongol state. The Mongols also set up successor states in Central Asia, in southern Russia, and in Persia. The Persian Khanate is called the Il Khanate, I-L, and then Khanate. The Il Khanate is distinct from the Chinese, the Yuan dynasty, the one that is set up in China, because in the Il Khanate, they actually, after several centuries, assimilate into the population. So the reason we're not going around speaking Mongolian and we don't talk about the impact of the Mongols as having that everybody sort of becomes like the Mongols is that the Mongols became like the people they ruled. So that's a really interesting thing about the Mongols. They conquer a lot of people. They facilitate exchange between people, but then they themselves, instead of passing on their culture to who they ruled, they adopt a lot of that culture. So the Mongols and the Il Khanate in Persia become Muslim. So that's kind of the way in which the Khanates function and the Mongol Empire functions. All right, so now moving on to trade networks. The Mongols and the Silk Roads in Unit 2 go together. And then now the Indian Ocean trade is another really important part of that, what's going on in this period.
So there are a few times where I love like a good crash course episode. This is one of them, okay? And I'm going to tell you that there are times to not watch them. But this is good because what we see in that very famous John Green episode is a great job hitting the themes of the Indian Ocean trade, because the Indian Ocean trade doesn't get the play that the Silk Road gets. Silk Road has a name, Indian Ocean trade has like a place. So what I like about it is, number one of the reasons why the Indian Ocean trade even happens is not because there's water and people have boats. It's because there's water, people have boats, and there's a wind to move them. The monsoon seasons are seasonal winds. These winds move north, starting over water, dropping moisture, wet wind over land, and sometimes move south, moving dry air and moving over water. What you need to understand is those winds allow people from the Swahili coast to go to India, and then to go to India to eventually go to Indonesia and back. So the monsoons create economic opportunities. They also allow cultural diffusion. So here it is. The number one most populated country in the world for Muslims is Indonesia. It's not Saudi Arabia. No. It's not the Sauds. It's not even India. That's number two. Number one, it's Indonesia. That explains this whole course. This whole course is summarized by that one line. Indonesia is filled with people that practice the Islamic faith. Why did that happen? Because of monsoons. That's it. There it is. Go home. So please understand, cultural diffusion doesn't purposely happen. It is often accidental. It travels on the back of winds and it travels on the back of merchants, leading me to the last one, the diaspora of Muslim merchants. Muslim merchants starting maybe, for example, on the Swahili coast, going to India, living there for 6 months, then going to Indonesia and living there for 6 months. At some point, they need to create schools. We call them madrasas. They need to create churches. We call them mosques. And in these madrasas and in these mosques, they're reading, writing in Arabic, the language of the faith. So now you have Muslim merchant communities of people who stay there for 6 months to a year to 3 years. Yes, they sometimes go home, and yes, sometimes they don't, because they're going to make a great living staying in Indonesia. And I think that AP World loves this stuff. So you take what you understood in Unit 1, and then you go to Unit 2, where they all play in a sandbox. Sometimes they get along, sometimes they don't. But no matter what, they're stuck in that sandbox, be it the Silk Road and the plague, or the Indian Ocean trade and the movement of religion. This slide, I think, is huge. Good. And we move on. Another part of the Indian Ocean trade I want to bring up in the next slide is how we see travelers moving around. So in the Silk Road, we had Marco Polo. And on the Trans-Saharan Trade Network and the Indian Ocean trade and the Silk Road, we have Ibn Battuta. So Ibn Battuta is a harder one to give play to because he didn't conquer anybody, and he often just recorded things, and that's not fun. You didn't kill anybody. But what I love about Ibn Battuta is because he traveled to so many different places, his point of view comes into play, his POV. And now you're going to see on the AP test a very good likelihood there's going to be a document written by Ibn Battuta. He is Mali, he is Muslim, but he is now in China. And that matters. It all happens because of the Indian Ocean Trade Network, the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, and the ability of these trade networks to welcome foreigners. Walls are broken down at this time. And finally, I do want to bring up that wind matters, faith matters, but the other thing on the next slide I want to make sure you understand is humans are using spice tea. They are creating ships with triangular sails, the lateen sail, and they are being able to use those sails to manage the winds, tacking with the wind to get smaller payloads further and faster. And if that weren't to happen, then the Indian Ocean Trade Network would never have been conquered. We also have this time period where you have the magnetic compass and the astrolabe. These are technologies sometimes from the Middle East, like the lateen sail, or from China, like the compass and the astrolabe. But none of these would have happened if it weren't for human. So sometimes humans trip into something such as champa rice or something such as monsoon seasons. But sometimes humans are in complete control of their destiny in the technological marvels of their time, and you see it still today. So these last few slides were showing you elements of spice tea as applied to trade. I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Posa. You're muted. I'll unmute you.
Yeah, so we wanted to give you some topics. These are things that actually we'd like you to go back and look at later, not necessarily things that we are going to cover now. There is some question about in the chat, concern about like DVQs and LEQs. Practice writing is really important. So yeah, let's go ahead, and I think that's something that is what we're going to do later on. We have on nights 3 and nights 4. BJ is going to go specifically over the DBQ rubric. He has this amazing presentation that's planned, and I think you don't miss that. And then also on night 4, we're going to do some practice with SAQ and LEQ prompts. So you study all these things, but how do you get points on the exam? That's what we want to help you with. So we're going to get through the rest of this material and make sure that the next couple of nights after these first 2 nights of content, you're really able to like figure out how to use this information to score points on the exam. So let's move forward. There are some possible topics really related to the spread of religion and the spread of disease, as it's because of these new trade routes, the networks of exchange that are happening here. So, and then other types of topics are comparisons of political organizations and then comparisons of trade. So those are some things to keep in mind. We can go ahead and move on to a quiz on this particular information. I believe that is it. Promise who's going to do the quiz. Quiz time.
Promise, can you share your screen with the quiz?
Oh. I feel like if I like share the screen, it might lag. Is it possible?
All right,
for
well, we can move on
share?
from the quiz. Maybe you can put it in the chat, in the backstage chat, and we'll figure out.
You
Okay.
place it in the backstage chat, I'll just share it.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to mention about essay practice is the DBQ, there's 130 composite points. The DBQ is 35. That is the single best way to improve your AP score. If you have like 3 knowledge, but you can write a DBQ, you can get a 4 or a 5. If you have 4 knowledge and you don't know how to write a DBQ, you might dip back into the 3. So when we talk about how to write these essays, how to structure these essays, I know some of you have been practicing a lot, but we want to make sure that we spend time helping you get that practice. And I know BJ and I too have, we can give you some feedback. We plan to give you some feedback on your essay writing. So yeah, quiz. Let's quiz. I'm going to put my email in the chat and you can email me your DBQ if you want. I'll give you feedback.
Promise, is that the link coming?
The good thing about Heimler's DBQ, I see that in the chat, is he has some worksheets that go along with it as well to help you practice. And really, once you know how to write a DBQ, just like practice, practice, practice. See if you can score that point. The problem is you need to give it to a teacher or who's been an AP reader so that they can tell you yes or no. Like, I see what you're doing here, but just saying the intended audience is the people does not actually get you the point. So make sure that when you're writing your essays, like, give it to a teacher for feedback. And BJ and I are now your teachers as well as your regular teacher. So we can give you some
I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have the quiz.
Great. All right.
There we are. Like I said earlier, this is where you might want to grab your phone and go ahead and take the quiz there. I'm going to do that too. It's kind of fun for me. Promise, I'm going to let you narrate though.
Okay.
All right, so I will go ahead and I have 73 people that have joined. Now we do have 400 and some, so we want to give a little bit of time. 175. Great. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, we went through Unit 2 pretty quickly, but I think if you understand the different regions and how they come together in trade, I think you're going to be fine. All right, we're going to want to make sure that link gets into the chat for those who are a little bit later to join. But for now, I think it's time to go ahead and start the quiz.
Okay, guys, remember for Silk Roads, this is mainly going to be focusing on the different, probably the past students that we've been talking about. So you need to think about what the Muslims, Islamic merchants have been focusing on and what they've spread, and also mainly focus on that information. So yeah, the answer is the establishment of merchant sailor organizations, because there weren't any actual organizations set up on the Silk Roads. But there were formation of new trading cities, because we talked about the caravanserais, and also the diasporic communities are the exact same. Come on, guys, answer the questions. You got this. everybody's answered. So yeah, China, one of the following regions that manufactured iron and steel were expanded mainly through China, while most of the other countries we talked about were focused more on like spices and goods. So this question is mainly going to be referring back to what China's money economy specifically was. Keep in mind this type of money economy didn't actually last. It did fail, and it got picked up later on in the unit. Yep, the answer is also right. Good job, guys. You're doing great. The Silk Road directly caused all the following except the development of maritime navigational inventions, because keep in mind the Silk Roads are quite literally in the name. They focus mainly on the land empires and land movement, not really talking about water. Good job, guys. Perfectly fine. I make the same mistakes. Move on to the next question, guys. Which of the following saw an increase in production in China, Persia, and India? It's textiles. The other ones weren't really even like papyrus was not even mentioned in this specific part of the course, and steel and iron we mentioned earlier in the questions. Which of the following luxury goods traded along the Silk Roads? It was definitely textiles. Rice, gold, and iron weren't really focused on within these Silk Roads, or they're not specifically called luxury goods. Remember, luxury goods are things that you probably only the ones at the higher caste levels can afford. A lot of people are talking about how textiles are considered luxury because you're thinking about it more on like the nowadays type of mindset where cotton is it's very easy to get. But back then, cotton and silk were stuff that you can only get if you were part of the richer class because it was not easy to produce. The Mongols did all the following cultural and technological transfers except for C, adoption of Quipu systems. Keep it coming. Good job. prime purpose of the Mongolian yam system was to improve communication throughout the empire, because it was, once again, you're consolidating it towards into one system specifically that everybody can utilize. That's a common trend that we see throughout all the units. Which of these was the name of the Mongol Khanate? Was definitely the Golden Horde. Remember, talking back to the 4 major regions that come up from the Mongols where they separated, and the Golden Horde is specifically the one in Russia.
Whoa. This will be our last question for this quiz. Here we go. Good. Tried. They did try. Thank you very much, Promise, for that quiz. You guys are doing a great job. I want you to know that you just got to keep trucking along, and you should be really proud of yourself. Some of these are very specific content pieces, and that's why we're asking them. We want you to remind yourselves that there are things you don't know. And now you're just going to go ahead and start Googling away on things you don't know. All right, we're going to jump back to our slideshow, and we'll progress there.
BJ, do you want me to share it, or would you like to share it?
I'm going to take over, so why not? You're going to take over, but I'll share.
Yeah, sure. Sounds great.
Yeah.
The sun is setting. I have lost the light.
So
They're chanting your name in the chat. BJ, BJ, BJ.
Walk away. All right. I love it. So I have to click slideshow, but I'm going to click the dots. Going to click the ad. Look at that. I like learning new things. Cool stuff. All right, let's go get them, Dodger.
All right, sounds good. Well, good news is I gave an entire cram lecture on Unit 3, the Ottoman Empire, specifically the Middle East, the land-based empires. There's 4 major land-based empires. One of them is the Ottoman Empire. And you can go back and watch that preview. Also, in your Cram Hub, there's like the Cram Hub section, the link that you were sent to. It has the review packet, and it has the review packet, and it has the slides. So actually, even if you don't want to go back and watch it, you can just get the information from my slides on the Ottoman Empire. So let's look at the land-based empires. Okay, so there are 3 Islamic gunpowder empires and then 1 Chinese empire, which is essentially similar. It's an early modern, large land-based empire that gets very, expands its territory through the use of gunpowder technology. So I'd like to say the Islamic gunpowder empires are awesome. O-S-M, awesome. Get it? Okay. Ottomans, Safavids, Mughals. And you can see on this map here that that is the order in which they're organized. They border one another. The Ottomans are in North Africa, the Middle East, and Southeastern Europe. The Safavids are a gunpowder empire that are in classical Persia. You can see there, it's like where the territory of modern day Iran, below the Caspian Sea, and that they border the Persian Gulf. And then we have the Mughals. The Mughals are the Islamic gunpowder empire in South Asia. When the College Board has their learning objectives, they want you to know that. They want you to be able to position these empires on the map and to talk about how they expand militarily. Okay, so that is the first main thing to know, is that these 3 Islamic gunpowder empires are large, multicultural empires that become larger and bigger than anything that had come before in those regions through the use of gunpowder technology, mainly not only guns, but also cannons, like mega cannons that can siege cities and take down walled cities like Constantinople. All right. So let's look into an important thing to know. If you want to know more about the Ottoman Empire, you can go back and look at the slides that I have on the Ottoman Empire. But I do want to emphasize that the Ottomans and the Safavids share a border and that they fight a series of wars. The Ottomans win those wars, but the consequence of those wars is further religious divide. There was a question earlier in the chat about, is this in this time period? Has there been the Sunni-Shia split? And the answer is yes. The Sunni-Shia split happens much earlier with the death of Muhammad. You have the origins of the Sunni-Shia split, the Islamic world breaking into these two sectarian divides because of questions over who should succeed Muhammad. So that happens much earlier, but it's worse in this time period. And it's worse because the Ottomans are Sunni and the Safavids are Shia. And both of those religions, both Sunni Islam and Shia Islam, are important to their political identity. So the Ottomans are the defenders of the faith, the protectors of the Holy Land of Mecca and Medina. And at that one point, the Ottoman sultans start to claim the title Caliph. Now, remember, I said the title Caliph is really important, right? Caliph has religious authority. Well, now the Ottoman Empire is not only ruled by a sultan, a Turkic sultan, but claims the title Caliph. So they have a religious authority. Meanwhile, the Safavids, who are an Islamic gunpowder empire, are Shia, and that becomes really important to their religious authority. So this division between these two Islamic gunpowder empires that border one another and fight, that worsens tensions between Sunni and Shia. What I'd like you to think about is the same thing is going on in Europe. In Europe, you have a bunch of political wars. From 1517 until 1648 is like 150 years of violent religious war in Europe between the Protestants and the Catholics. So Christianity is having their religious wars between different branches and sects of Christianity. And at this time in the Islamic world, between the Ottomans and the Safavids, they are having their own violent sectarian religious wars. So this is a time of religious war, 1450 to 1750. These key terms, bureaucracy, elites, and legitimize, are terms that we have used and will continue to use. So I think it's important to make sure that you're familiar with these key terms so that when you see them in a prompt, you become clear about what to identify with. So elites are just the people in power. This here, the political, social, and economic system of Ottoman governance is what I covered in the previous cram. Do you think that I should revisit this, or should we move on from here? Yeah, because we did it in the previous cram, and you can, yeah, explained it. I spent about 20 minutes explaining this slide, so. But and then, okay, so here's the thing I would emphasize about those Ottoman institutions on the previous slide, is that the Ottomans are faced with the problem that all these other empires are faced with. The Ottomans, Safavids, Mughals, and Qing China, which BJ is going to talk about, these are empires that are so large, their populations are diverse. They're ruled by a small group of people, like 2 to 15% of the population, depending on the empire. So most of the people don't share their religion or share the ethnic group or cultural identity. So the problem is, how do you rule over a really large territory that is very diverse? What sort of strategies of rule will these different empires have in order to incorporate them? So looking at the Islamic gunpowder empires, let's now compare that to East Asia and the situation that Qing China is going to face, the Manchu Empire is going to face coming after the Ming.
So our goal in our next slides is to dive deeper into some document usage. We do not have the type of time that I think we would love to dedicate, but here is a document that is going to talk about what is going on in Western Europe. So Western Europe is in a place where it's trying to decide its values politically. And some want to move forward to this more parliamentary, more democratic, more people-centered. But that's a very small minority at this time. There is still these kings of France and England who believe that the leaders of the empires are divine, that they gain their power from heaven above. Otherwise, they would not have the divine right or the mandate to be leading. So that is why I wanted to share this document with you. I would encourage you to read it with the understanding of the mandate of heaven in China so you can see the similarity. But also, it's with this divine right of kings that you're going to have backlash. So we are only 1 to 200 years away from a revolutionary time period. So when the line in the sand is drawn and the king says divine right, there's going to be a small minority, a growing small minority, they're going to say, that's not how we're going to roll. Now, you're going to see absolutism in France very strong, but you're going to see an emerging parliamentary system in England. That same mentality travels to the Americas and eventually part of the revolutionary era. Now, another way to legitimize rule besides divine right is military power. This idea that our fleet, our military is stronger than yours. And they're going to show that in paintings and artwork and carvings and miniatures. They can show so many different ways to show their prowess. Paintings of battles. We still have that going on in museums today. So this legitimizing rule means if your king is weak, he might go and attack someone else. So as the Ottomans were strong, this is the time period where the Ottomans tried to become stronger. It's somewhat more defensive because they were trapped as a landlocked empire. But this is also the same time period where France and Spain and England are going to start their exploits to take more land, to expand their power, to make bigger boats, to attack each other sometimes. Another way to legitimize your rule is public spending. And you can spend to build a Great Wall of China, a Forbidden City, a Palace of Versailles. You don't even see my hands. I'm just doing this thing all over the place. You don't even see it. It's wasted. So we have to understand that when you build the Taj Mahal with the Mughals, or you build the Palace of Versailles, you are hiring people. You are doing it for a nationalism role. Like, this is our palace. This is our mausoleum for our queen. So you're going to find that sometimes governments build for their own power. They are now paying the paychecks of their citizens. So their citizens are going to support them. So this is another example of building. So obviously I already spoke on that. So besides what we were seeing going on with this legitimizing thing going on in different places, I want to sit down and talk more specifically about what was going on in East Asia. I'm not against you learning the different empires or dynasties of China. Go ahead, memorize them. I don't do it. I don't care what year the Qing came into power. And I actually don't even care why the Ming failed. This is not an East Asian history class. This is big picture. So during these 13 to 1600s, what was going on? Well, Zheng He explored. Zheng He then came back, and the Ming said, no more. We don't need what the rest of the world has. The Chinese are very ethnocentric. Their way is the best way, and they don't need outside trade or outside influence, at least maritime. They actually started deconstructing all of their ships. The silver trade needed to be controlled. They wanted to regulate the comings and goings of foreigners. You're going to see that happening in the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan. China then, after the Ming, come the Qing. Now, the Qing are foreigners. They're the Manchu coming down, taking over China. They need to validate themselves by inheriting some of the Chinese traditions like Confucianism, but also using military control. They are a gunpowder empire. But when it comes to trade, they still have that Ming mentality of foreigners are a threat or foreigners are not necessary. And I would say that by the end of the 1700s, by right early 1800s, China has closed itself off like Japan to the rest of the world in terms of globalization. They do that to legitimize their own authority, but this will have a long-term effect in the relationships in the 1800s. So we're going to take a quiz break and we're going to do a Unit 3 quiz. Because of time, we're only going to do a few questions from the Unit 3 quiz, but I'm sure you're going to enjoy it just the same. Unit 3, that was going to be Promise. Promise, do you have your Unit 3 quiz ready in the backstage?
Yeah, I sent the link in there right now.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share that. I heard some people were criticizing the music, and I'm just going to say I'm rolling with it. You know, so I'm sorry for those who are like, I want loud, quieter music. Sorry. Boom. Screen. Yeah, I'm actually saying all this out loud. There we go. So this is a Unit 3 quiz. Go ahead and start maybe taking a picture or doing the QR code. Somebody could place that in the actual chat. That'd be highly appreciated. Can anybody put the link there? Oh, that's cool. Right. Got about 250 points. 500 of you are on the call. You're really getting that. So let's just guy can put it.
Okay, and we're starting. Okay, remember, whenever you think of Mansa Musa, the rich guy that had all the money, and also Islam, just think Mali, the 3 M's. Mansa Musa Mali. Which of the following revolutions led to the Enlightenment in the Age of Reasoning? Remember, algebraic revolution and technological revolution didn't happen. They don't exist. The Industrial Revolution, you don't really have to focus on in this unit yet. It hasn't even happened. The Scientific Revolution is where we start thinking about reason. We're going past just blaming everything on religion, and you're starting to actually think about the science and the science that goes behind how the world functions. Okay, which empire is the primary rival to the Ottoman empires? It's the Safavids, because remember they were the two different Muslims. So there's the Sunni, and then you had the Shia, and so they always fought against each other, and that's why the Ottomans had the Safavids, which are the greatest enemies. Oh. Well, the answer to that one, even though the answer to that one was gunpowder. And remember, this mainly because of the gunpowder empires. Remember, you can much easily defeat kingdoms and other people when you have guns instead of just relying on spears and close-ranged weapons. Yep, so the previous country before the Ottomans is the Byzantine Empire. Remember, they are the Christians. Good job, everybody. Oh yeah, shout out to Julia. The Byzantine Empire did continue to exist even though the rest of the Roman Empire did fall. Which of the following empires did not exist in this era? The Mayan Empire. Remember, the Mayan Empire was inside the Americans and it did fall long before this. You guys are doing great. And yeah, the samurai were considered the elite. The other ones were considered lower in the caste system. You guys are doing great. So revenue, think money, and the biggest way that these empires got money is through tax collection. You can see this based on Giza tax that happened, or the multiple other ways that they get money, which is only through tax. Akbar the Great, this is going to be referring back to the Ottoman empires. He was known for his policies of religious tolerance because he allowed other religions to prosper, and he was probably one of the only one that allowed this as compared to his next predecessor. Akbar is very important, guys, so make sure to know him. Remember the Devir-Shirme system is basically when the Ottomans took Christian boys, specifically from the Balkans, and then made them serve either as soldiers or either as bureaucrats. This is very important to know. Yep, Akbar was religiously tolerant.
I don't know. I just confirmed something I didn't understand. I'm going to let Dr. Posa go ahead and take it from here with leading the slideshow. But I'm going to be back here talking a little bit about some of East Asia topics as we progress. Listen, we have 20 minutes. Take a deep breath. Ask for somebody to get me some coffee, but we're doing fine. A lot of you doubted we were going to get here, but we're going to get here. So Amy, I'm going to pass it to you.
Okay, so we had some requests in the chat for to kind of go back and do a little bit more detail on Unit 2 and Unit 3 before we move on to Unit 4, so that you guys have a really good foundation for that. So moving back to Unit 2, I was thinking about just looking at the questions in the packet. And while I'm doing that, PJ, would you mind thinking about like comparing the different trade routes in Unit 2? So Unit 2 is just Mongols. We did a comparison of some of the Khanates, and then trade. You know, you have trans-Saharan trade and overland trade, and then the Indian Ocean trade. So perhaps some of the comparisons that we can make between the different trade routes in terms of similarities and differences, let's do kind of a Venn diagram comparison with that. Maybe going back to that thesis structure. I'll pull up the thesis again, and then maybe they can type a thesis in the chat related to comparing two trade routes.
I mean, I would look at it as, don't compare one was on land and one was on water. It's more like what impact. So both the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade affected the belief structures. Give me an example of that. I mean, we could talk about how the Islam is going to spread along the Indian Ocean trade network, but we could also say that a lot of the Mongols were Muslims before they even got to the House of Wisdom and Baghdad because of the Silk Road and the interconnectivity there. We could talk about the impact that the environment played, and you can maybe go from the monsoons. You could talk to caravanserai on the Trans-Saharan trade network. And you could talk about Pax Mongolica, about how the Silk Road was being protected by the government. So I would look at it as knowing them separately is nice, but what were the changes that they brought? They brought economic connection. So now you have Australian bananas being eaten in Africa, and we eat 20 some bananas a week at my house. So to me, it does matter that these trade networks happened, and your job is not to like break them down in the most obtuse way, but rather find those big picture things.
All right, so let's do that. Let's think about causes and consequences when it comes to Unit 2 networks of exchange. And when you think about causes, it's usually new technologies, right? What are the technologies and the innovations that are driving the expansion of each of these trade networks, each of these networks of exchange? So you can write on your paper if you want to, if you're brainstorming, if there's a question about trade, write down Trans-Saharan trade, Indian Ocean trade, overland trade. And then on the left, what are the things that are leading to the expansion of that trade? What are the technologies? What are the ship designs? What are the, there are some, I'm not going to name them because I know that you guys are going to pull this information out of your brain and you have it in the chat and you have it on your slides. And then thinking about consequences. What is spread? What is changed, right? What ideas? What belief systems? So maybe make a chart, right? Write it on paper. 3 trade routes, the 3 big ones that they could ask about in the AP curriculum. Write it down, and on the left, write causes, and on the right, write consequences. And then from that, you will be able to get your thesis statement. That's like a comparison, because you'll be able to see, like, okay, if there's similarities in technology causing the expansions of trade routes, then that is going to be, or religion. I'm not sure why this is moving around. All right, so although blah, 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 blah were similar, right, 2 trade routes, they differed in.
Because of the time we have, I'm just going to go to Zara. Zara says, both the Silk Road and the Indian Ocean trade routes affected the productivity of empires and the desires of the population, considering they included new introductions of technology, including the lateen sail, astrolabe, compass, from the maritime route, and the spread of new desires, including the Silk Road distribution of ivory, spices, and silk. So what happens here is Zara is using tons of information, stuff that can be saved for later on in the body paragraph, but is giving a line of reasoning. Now, we don't want to say words like productivity and desires and then just start mentioning commodities and technologies. So we need to sit and look at productivity and desires and elaborate on that versus giving evidence of other things later on. So Zara's doing a good job here. It has a focus, but at the same time, like, the worst word I hear from my students is the word power. Don't use power in your essay unless it's got some sort of descriptor right before it. But I think what Dr. Posa is doing here is we're trying to get you guys to think about a comparison of these empires. But with only 15 minutes remaining, I'd encourage you to dive back into whatever text you have, a Heimler video series, or maybe some mapping that will help you actually notice what commodities are spreading through and what religions are moving around. That's what I've done in my classroom. That's what I'm hoping you've done in your classroom. Sorry about the 85 other people that I negated when I was reading that one. ChatGPT.
All right. Okay, so that is Unit 2, Networks of Exchange plus Mongols, those 3 different trade routes. And there is a mention in the chat about the different historical thinking skills. You have continuity and change over time, causation, and comparison. Tonight, we've been practicing comparison. Through the different nights, we are going to be practicing all 3 historical thinking skills. Those are the ones that are tested on the AP exam. So are there any questions about Unit 2, Networks of Exchange? I think we've answered all of the questions in the packet. So let's circle back to Unit 3, because some people are predicting that Unit 3 is going to be the DBQ. And so I think that's, you know, people like to make predictions, but that is a popular one, it seems like. Unit 3 is just 4 empires: the Mughals, the Safavids, the Ottomans, and the Qing. And so we talked a little bit about the Ottomans. On your packet, one of the first questions is, what are the 3 Islamic gunpowder empires? And then what is the role of the Shirme system in managing the empires? For the College Board in the curriculum, what they want you to know is how they manage diversity. And the Ottomans have 2 ways. One is that they take conquered people and they conscript them into state service. So as the empire expands, how are they going to manage that territory? They take the people that they conquer, especially in the Balkans. The Balkans is this mountainous region just north of Greece, right across from Italy, right? So you have this mountainous region. It's Christian. There's a bunch of different Slavic-speaking people. When the Ottomans come into that territory, they force them to serve the state. They take them as young boys. They could be anything but the Sultan. They could be really high up in government. They could be governors. They could be the minister, the vizier. But that in China, you take an exam to get a job in government. In the Ottoman Empire, they have this system, the devshirme system, of taking the conquered people, converting them to Islam, and then putting them into a government position. The special, if you are not serving in the government, you would be in the military. The special military unit of the Ottoman Empire is called the Janissaries. So the Janissaries are the elite military corps, also formed of conquered people. Young boys between the ages of 10 to 14 would generally be taken. It's an early Turkic tradition, not necessarily invented by the Ottomans, but adapted by the Ottomans to solve the problem of how, when they are expanding, how are they going to co-opt conquered people and put them into state service? The second institution to know is question 23 about religious diversity. So the first one, what is the devshirme? The second question is about religion. If subjects paid a tax and didn't challenge the rule of the Sultan, they were left alone. Christian subjects did not have to follow Sharia law. Jewish subjects did not have to follow Sharia law. They paid a tax. They had a local ruler, so the rabbi in charge of the religious community of Jewish people in Istanbul, because the Ottomans renamed it Istanbul, that as long as the rabbi who was appointed by the Sultan was loyal, they could follow their own local religious laws. So this is an example of how the Ottoman Empire allows for a degree of tolerance in order to manage the diversity of its subjects. This is in contrast to Spain. Spain kicks out Jews in 1492, forces Muslims to convert. And so whereas in Spain and Europe is forcing religion onto its subjects, the Ottoman Empire decides to allow for some degree of diversity as long as they pay a tax and they don't challenge the authority of the Sultan. The most tolerant of the Islamic gunpowder empires is the Mughals under Akbar. The Mughals did have a tax, but Akbar repealed it, said non-Muslim subjects don't even have to pay a tax, that they can just be treated the same and have the same tax rate as Muslims. He also created a religion that was big enough for everyone, called the Divine Faith. So on the spectrum of like religious, how these different empires, comparing how these different empires approach the religious diversity of their subjects, you have the Ottomans who allow for some degree of diversity as part of their strategy of ruling over these people without them revolting. And the Mughals under Akbar, which is very tolerant, although the successors after Akbar actually roll back a lot of his tolerant policies. They reinstate the jizya, and that brief period of tolerance is no longer. Now, what about the Safavids? The Safavids are really interesting. So the Safavids are very intolerant. And BG, I think you had a really good explanation for why last time when we talked about the Ottoman. The question was, why are the Safavids intolerant? They're the most intolerant. They're like the Spanish.
I mean, I would look at them that they're intolerant because of where they are. So geographic location matters to them. They are unique that they are going to be Shia. So it's not about them being Shia and that makes them intolerant. It's that they are a minority sect in the world today and then trapped between two Sunni, very large land-based empires who are also economically dominant. So the militaries of the Mughals, the militaries of the Ottomans were overwhelming. So all the Safavid could do is nudge left, nudge right, hoping to take, I don't want to say land in the name of land, but rather people, Shia people. They remember Dar al-Islam, but Dar al-Islam in the name of the Shia sect. So it really did make them going to be more intolerant, and they weren't more metropolitan. They weren't more urban. And when you're metropolitan and urban, you have to respect diversity more.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so I think that's really interesting that the Shia are embattled. They're surrounded on both sides. So for them, political loyalty needs to also require religious loyalty as well. So they make sure that everyone is Shia Muslim. So the system that I was referring to for religious authority, religious autonomy, is the millet system, MILLET. And that just refers to these autonomous communities that are allowed to have their own religious laws and rule over themselves. It's interesting because when Ferdinand and Isabella kick out the Jews in 1492, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire welcomes them. So it's a deliberate strategy. Is it that he's nicer? No, it's all of this is a strategy. What do the Ottomans care about? They care about reinforcing their power. They have a religiously diverse population. They're the new people on the block in Europe. So they need to figure out how are they going to reinforce their power. And they do that by having this policy of allowing Christians to remain Christian, allowing Jews to remain Jewish, as long as they pay a tax and are loyal to the Sultan. Now, they do need to staff their government and staff their military, and that's where they also come up with a system of taking conquered people, not an exam system. So the next part then, speaking of exam systems, is about Ming to Qing China. And there was a question in the chat about who are the Manchu. Now, the Manchu are the ethnic group. When you think of Qing Dynasty, Manchu Empire, these are synonymous. The Manchu Empire is the Qing Dynasty. The Manchu are an ethnic group just north of Korea. They're the people outside the Great Wall. This is just a region. And they rule over China under the Qing Dynasty. They established the Qing Dynasty from 1644 to 1911. So that the piece of two important characteristics of Ming China that BJ mentioned, the early exploration under Zheng He, and then isolationism. Those are the two important characteristics. The significant change from Ming China to Qing China, an important continuity. The change is the Manchu are in charge, and they're going to establish a large land-based multicultural gunpowder empire that is diverse because they have all sorts of people. It's like twice as big as Ming China. So they take their cannons and they take their military and they conquer. This is the Manchu Empire that's under the Qing Dynasty. But a continuity, they are isolationist.
Hey, I just want to refocus everybody right now. At some point, we've decided to move Unit 4 to tomorrow. So we are only 6 minutes out from ending for the night. So what we want to do is get you to blow up the chat with questions that can be answered in about 30 seconds. So I'll answer and Amy will answer. So don't ask about any Unit 4 questions, and please do not ask about the Cold War. Give us a question about Units 1, 2, or 3. Ready, set, go. Columbian Exchange is Unit 4. Move you on tomorrow. Encomienda tomorrow. I love Heimler too.
The Manchu are the Qing. There was a
Al-Andalus
question.
is
The
the
Manchu
West.
follow the Qing. The Manchu are the Qing. The Qing and the Manchu are the same.
So Al-Andalus, I believe, is something that could be on the AP exam because it is Western Spanish Islamic state created during the Umayyad, kind of lost during the Abbasid, but it eventually will have a lot of Muslims living there all the way into the late 1400s. And that is great AP worldness. The fact that Spain at one point was dominated in the southern region by Muslims. Architecture and its knowledge of ironworks, highly influenced.
All right, there was a question about where the Manchu came from. They're north of Korea. They came south inside the Great Wall, conquered Ming China, and then set up their own Chinese dynasty that they named the Qing.
I'm seeing a lot of you talk about religious diversities, religious tolerance. So I believe that religious tolerance is something we need to learn today to understand our own world, let alone understanding the world then. So I believe that the millet system is a great example of religious tolerance, letting local communities with local faiths locally run themselves as long as they pledge a greater allegiance to the Ottoman Sultan. I actually look at the jizya tax as tolerance. Now follow my thinking. When you tax non-Muslims, you are giving them the choice to maintain their faith. When you kill non-Muslims, you're intolerant. Now, yes, Mr. Dranby, that's not nice to tax people that don't believe in your faith. Blow your roll. The religion wants to spread. The religion wants to expand and save more souls. So at least it's just saying you have to pay a tax. And over time, people don't want to pay a tax, they become Muslims. And in that way, the state has successfully led people to the water. Now, you're going to have different kings that use jizya. It helps expand the faith. But you're also going to have different kings like Akbar, the Mughals, who get rid of the jizya in the name of being tolerant towards the Hindu majority. And I really believe that religious tolerance is something that we could acknowledge in the Protestant Reformation. The Roman Catholic Church had a very hard time with challenge, not to Christianity, not to God and faith, but to the institution of the Roman Catholic Church. That intolerance led to a Protestant Reformation, a blowing up of what was the Roman Catholic Church. And then the Roman Catholic Church had a choice. Do we maintain what we believe in as the Roman Catholic Church, or do we evolve? And for a time period, they said, no, we are who we are. So they had the Inquisition, where they went after people to make them defend their religion and acknowledge the accuracy of the Pope and papal authority. Salem witch trials, for example, that type of mentality. But you also have the conquistadors. The conquistadors are conquering in the name of God, in the vein of the Spanish Roman Catholic agenda. So you see tolerance and you see intolerance.
And speaking of, just real quickly, there's some questions in the chat about taxes. We've been talking about the jizya, the tax on non-Muslims. So differentiating taxes, non-Muslims versus Muslims. There's some questions about tax farming. Tax farming is literally just, instead of a central government tax collecting authority, farming it out to private individuals. So it's a way of managing taxes, and that's not centralized. That's going to change for the Ottomans and the next period in the 19th century. So that's why it's on there. Is like, okay, how are we going to collect taxes? They just farm it out to private individuals. Oh, the other thing that I want to mention, there was a question about the 8 flag system of the Manchu. That's referred to as the banner armies, which basically is just like each like unit of the Manchu army has a banner or a flag. It's the specific way in which they organize their armies and to unite the different people that they conquer, so that they can have a more effective fighting force. So you can talk about the banner armies, kind of like the Janissaries.
I think in the name of having 1 minute left, I'm going to go ahead and pop up just a little wrap up. We did not get to finish with you everything we wanted to, but that doesn't mean we can't do it tomorrow. We will be able to finish all of AP World in our cram nights, focusing a lot on the writing for the last 2 nights, 2.5 nights. So I have confidence in that. So what I just want to do right now is acknowledge that we did have a team working. A lot of our team were working behind the scenes, answering your questions, prodding you, trying to keep you focused at times. The quizzes were made, and we're going to eventually have a lot of video being made and shown by our crew. I want to thank Dr. Posa for coming out. She was the mastermind of a lot of tonight's work, and I appreciated that. Tomorrow, what we'll be doing is on May 7th, units 4 through 8. And yeah, we might push 8 until the next night. We'll roll with it. We need to make sure we're bringing it to you, but giving you all the details we can. And there is so much detail to give, as you would know. If you are liking the cram, and we would like you to maybe blow it up and share it, and share what you're getting out of it. Just because it's a different type of model than just watching a video that was made 5 years ago or maybe 15 years ago. It is interactive, and we want it to be interactive, even if it makes it messy at times. We don't mind that. So please make sure you follow @ThinkFiveable on your social media. And with that slide's like my favorite slide. We're done for the night. Any remaining thoughts, Dr. Posa?
Thank you guys for sticking with us. And, the replay is going to be available if you want any further clarification. We're really enjoying this. We're going to get you there. We're going to get through the content. And here is the founder of Five of All, Amanda, to give us some final words.
What's up, y'all? I'm just going to end the stream. Just want to thank you, but please fill out the survey that's linked on the button below so we can see how you're feeling.
All right. Give you a second to find that link. It's right there at the bottom. It's in that, I don't know, is that teal box? AP World Night 1 survey. Be honest, be supportive, but also give us some constructive feedback. We'd love